Henderson. Dr. Henderson is an assistant professor of management at Northern State University in Aberdeen, South Dakota. She earned her doctorate in business administration from Anderson University in Indiana. Her research interests include managerial and leadership topics as they relate to Indigenous communities. Amber is a Native Nation Rebuilder Fellow, Salzburg Global Fellow, and National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development 2018 Native American 40 Under 40 Award recipient. I'd like to welcome Dr. Henderson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. Speaking of imposter syndrome, it never gets comfortable hearing somebody give an introduction. So I thank you. And before I start my presentation, I do want to just give a quick thank you to all of you and the work that you do with TRIO, because I know that the services you provide potentially make or break the success as it relates to academic success of a lot of students. So I just wanted to give that quick accolade to all of you. As Krista had shared, I am an assistant professor of management at Northern State University. And today I'm going to share with you a little bit about imposter syndrome, specifically sharing a little bit of my story. So I'll be interjecting my story. I'll start it at the very beginning from a young child. And basically, I like to call it the why me story instead of the me story. A lot of you maybe throughout your lives have also faced times of imposter syndrome. Instead of being comfortable sharing your story, it's why me, meaning why was I selected for that, or why did I have the honor of doing different things. And I think the goal of this entire thing is not to it's not that you will never feel like an imposter. There are always those moments, but the goal for me is more to just provide some tools and some insight and information for individuals to maybe talk themselves down faster, so that, yeah, we all can still have imposter moments, but they don't have to become essentially an imposter life. And so I'll define imposter syndrome, how to recognize it in yourself. If you yourself do not have imposter syndrome, that's awesome, but maybe you can recognize it in other individuals. And then we'll move into how to manage and if you have it yourself, and how to mentor it in other individuals. And then lastly, closing with just celebrating accomplishments and helping others celebrate accomplishments along the way. So a little bit about me. I know that some of you are joining from North Dakota. I am a fellow North Dakotan, and I grew up in Rolla, North Dakota. For those of you that don't know, Rolla is located right by the Turtle Mountain Reservation. My background, my dad is Turtle Mountain. I'm enrolled in the Turtle Mountain tribe, and my mom is a 100% Finlander. So that's a little bit about me. But our stories all start at the very beginning. So I do want to just remind everyone that as you're thinking about this topic of imposter syndrome, that a lot of it does go back to the way in which you grew up, how you define success, and what that looks like. So for me, I think there have been moments, obviously I'm very happy with how things have turned out thus far with my life, but imposter syndrome hit early on as a high school senior. I had planned to attend Dartmouth out on the East Coast, and it was maybe a month before I was headed there. I just panicked and I completely backed out. I'm a first generation college student, and I didn't really understand how to navigate higher ed at all. So I let some of the symptoms of imposter syndrome take over. And so, like I said, that's one of my goals, is to kind of give us some of that insight to talk us down before we make some really big life-altering decisions. So I just wanted to mention that as we're thinking about this topic of imposter syndrome, it can happen in all aspects of life. Of course, it predominantly comes out in a lot of high achieving individuals in all aspects, but it can come out even, that's just a picture of some volunteer service. And then lastly, I'm also a mom. Imposter syndrome can come out as a parent. Those of you that are parents can probably relate to that, the questioning of, how am I qualified to be a parent and do the things that I need to do? So just kind of keeping that in mind as we go through the topics today. So again, I like to provide a little bit of in-depth in regards to my background. Krista mentioned I'm a Native Nation rebuilder. I'm also a mom, a sister, volunteer, and just keeping in mind that it really doesn't matter what aspect of life it is, that it can come out at any time, but not to let it negatively impact that, still go for it, not to discredit yourself. So if you think you might have imposter syndrome, I'm not the only one that has it. There are also other very well-known individuals that have alluded to the fact that they have felt like imposters at times. Including my favorite Game of Thrones individual from the Stark family. But others, Michelle Obama, Tom Hanks, Lady Gaga. So even after all of their accomplishments, kind of questioning the fact of, you know, why did I get this opportunity? But let's take a moment and just define imposter syndrome. So essentially, if you have ever doubted your abilities, if you feel like a fraud, if you're unable to internalize success, so this isn't even getting to the point of celebrating success. If you don't celebrate success, you might have a certain level of imposter syndrome. But if you're unable to even internalize the success, that's a um, definition of imposter syndrome. And it's disproportionately affects high achieving individuals. Um, they'll find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. And so in a moment, we'll look at some of those symptoms, how you can identify if it's yourself that has some of those symptoms, or maybe you notice it in the students that you serve. And I really think that especially with each of you and the work that you're doing, it's likely that you do notice this in some way or another. And hopefully in the latter part of my presentation, it'll give some just insight or food for thought in thinking about how you might approach students to help them through that and help them navigate that so that they don't make detrimental decisions that can impact the trajectory of their success. And so, why is this so important? And kind of alluded to this, but there's a number of studies that have shown imposter syndrome really shows a lack of self-belief that's correlated to anxiety. So it might be with individuals who, again, yourself or your students might be very high functioning anxious individuals that are showing this. It might be displayed through low confidence in some of the things that they say about themselves, and then in the extreme sense, self-sabotage. So kind of going back to my story of my senior year of high school, and having in my mind that, okay, I've been accepted to this Ivy League school, less than a month before I'm set to go, just backing out, I can't do it. Well, then kind of fast forward, I had decided then to attend what is now University of Jamestown. At the time, it was Jamestown College. And it didn't go away just because I chose something in my mind that was a better fit, closer to home, that I could succeed. I still had these levels of self-sabotage going on. throughout high school, I didn't really study a whole lot. I didn't know how to study. And so I almost, after my first semester of my freshman year at Jamestown College, I was contemplating dropping out of college completely. I had some conversations, with my parents who, again, neither of my parents had graduated from high school, let alone go on to college. So some of those conversations were hard to have, about, do I continue on or not? And it was just a moment of self-sabotage. I didn't really realize at the time what was happening. Luckily, I had a really good friend, and I have 4 older brothers, so one of them kind of convinced me, "No, continue on. You're capable of doing this. Keep going." Luckily, they did because it turned out, completely fine. But from a psychological standpoint, imposter syndrome, in a lot of instances, it can be influenced by certain factors early in life. Um, and a lot of it's related to the development of certain beliefs and attitudes towards success, attitude towards one's self-worth. Um, in many instances, it might be feelings of, I don't belong. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but those might be very um, specific thoughts of not belonging in spaces. That doesn't mean you don't belong, but it might be that you're unique to what those spaces have typically um, noticed from individuals. So let's get to how to recognize imposter syndrome in yourself and potentially in others. So one of the things is thinking to yourself that you're a fake, you're going to be found out. So individuals who, again, are high achieving, might feel like they don't deserve that they don't belong in those spaces. Some individuals that have imposter syndrome will have a mentality of, I just lucked out. And it's not that maybe luck or fate doesn't play a certain part of individual success, but it has to be more than that. It's not just that somebody lucked out. And so even though we're looking at potential symptoms of imposter syndrome, we can kind of look at these also in your mentorship roles, in your advising roles that you might hold. Even for those of you that are supervisors, you can maybe notice some of this in the subordinates that work with you. So the concept of, if I can do it, anyone can. And this is a hard one, but um, sometimes we'll notice individuals are meaning well when they say this. If I can do it, you can do it. Um, and trying to be motivational in that respect. But if we notice that individuals are saying that, if you tend to say that yourself, it might be a certain level of imposter syndrome that's going on. I always think it's a great idea. I try to do it in my classes, remind students that it's not easy or everyone would do it. What they're doing and the feats that they're achieving. Each student is very individual. We don't necessarily know what it took for them to get there, not even taking into account, potential emotional and mental um, pieces that are playing a role in that too. So if you, again, if you are saying this yourself or if you have others, it might be a indication of imposter syndrome. So the next one, I had a lot of help. Um, a lot of times, individuals with imposter syndrome will be very quick to give credit to other individuals. They like to make sure that people know that they help them, but at the same time, not taking credit for the work that they have done. Of course, we know that navigating any system, any space, higher education and otherwise. It does take help, and it takes learning how to find the help and the resources that are available. I think a lot of times that is the case, of, first, and again, you all know this better than I, but having students identify what resources are available to them. But then this is really the next step of once they've identified those resources and and they do realize, whether they tell you it or not, how helpful those resources are, but not allowing them to think that their success is because of the help that they've received, and having some frank and factual conversations with them about, yes, you may have received these resources and this help, but every individual that has a certain level of success has also navigated the resources available to them. It's not what has given them the success. Kind of hand in hand with that is the concept of I've had connections. Um, and this one, I'm a firm believer in networking and the power of networking. Just because somebody has connections and has become a great networker doesn't mean that the success that they've had is only because of that. I won't say that it's not beneficial. I think it's very beneficial to network and um, have connections in all spaces, but reminding yourself or other individuals that it's not only because of those connections. Sometimes imposters will think, oh, they're being nice. That's why they're giving me a shout out, or they're giving me a kudos, or whatever it might be. But thinking that that's not necessarily for everyone, like getting comfortable taking the compliments. And from the standpoint of, I come from a faculty role, um, but I try to give, really specific feedback, so that the students realize it's not a blanket statement. I'm not just being nice. Of course, I try to be cordial, but it's about their competency in the work that they've shown. Also, imposters will sometimes have a mindset that, failure is not an option, right? So I succeeded because it wasn't an option. Um, so this is where I want to take us back to the psychology of our early upbringings and how this plays a role in our potential identity of having imposter syndrome. I'll take you back to that freshman year at Jamestown College. Um, I don't know why I took it my freshman year, but I had a statistics class, and our grade was based on a midterm and a final, and I did terrible on the midterm. I think I failed the midterm. And I remember going to visit a brother of mine who happened to live in Jamestown at the time, thank goodness. But I went to see him at work, and I was sitting in his office crying. I was crying. I had done so well in high school, um, made it to a really high level university, didn't go. And now I'm, flunking one of my first classes. And I will never forget, like, as big brothers often do, they're really blunt in their feedback. And he was just like, well, you're gonna do just fine. And he's like, you're a Henderson, you're stubborn, and there's no other option. And I think back to that because in a lot of ways, I think, well, yeah, that was true. And I just kind of kept going and ended up passing the class. But thinking about the pieces that brought us to where we are, and when I come to this one, and if you have this mindset of failure is not an option, maybe taking a moment to step back and think about, where does that come from? Is that something that's internal? And yes, we are all individuals, but is it something that came from something that's rooted differently? Um, Parents and so forth. Um, so this next one, I'm pretty sure, or I kind of think, individuals with imposter syndrome will often not give a definite, say, well, maybe, right? They're unsure of themselves, even though they've done the work. Maybe it's a research paper, presentation, something else. It might be a work related, but not giving a definite. That can be an indication of imposter syndrome. So this is the fun phenomenon. I made it up as I went. Um, in latter terms, I like to say, like, I BS'd my way through it. And some individuals will say that they just made it up as they went. It was really successful, and that's not often the case. Um, but alluding to that, or sometimes thinking about things in a different way of the process and in how we develop something is there's so much focus on the doing, right? The busy work of things that if if we're busy doing something or say creating a PowerPoint, then we're feeling productive, right? That it wasn't made up as it was as we went along. But then there's this misconception that if somebody is internalizing and thinking about the process of how they want to create, let's say a presentation or a paper, that's not productive. And kind of reminding ourselves and potentially our students that there's different ways of coming to a solution and helping them get analytical in how they view productivity. Um, and I'm getting a little bit off track here, but this idea of, oh, I just made it up. No, probably not. If it was a successful outcome, it wasn't just by chance. So now I'd like to dive into different types of imposters. And the ones that I'll cover, they come from Valerie Young's book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. Why I decided to share this book and show that I do know there's males listening as well, and these concepts relate to you too. But imposter syndrome, at least from the research, has shown that it does impact women to a greater extent. So the first one, perfectionists. Perfectionists they set an extremely high expectation for themselves. Even if they meet 99% of their goals, they feel like failures. So for instance, it might be that individual that did extremely well on a report that they were putting together, and then there was one typo, and if you're their supervisor, their whoever it is, and you point out the typo just so it can be fixed, they're really upset with themselves that, oh, I should have noticed that. um, the next one, experts. So experts are constantly looking for new certifications, trainings. They're looking to improve their skills. um, they might be hesitant to ask questions or speak up in meetings because they're afraid to look silly, if they don't already know the answers. So this would be a second type of imposter. Um, these are, you can have many different types. It's not just one or the other. So you might notice that, oh, I have perfectionist qualities. I also feel like I have expert qualities. Um, some of you may be natural geniuses, right? So when a natural genius, when they have to struggle or work hard to accomplish something, they have this idea that they're not good enough. So again, this might be the case with potential students. If they come and, oh, I can't do this, it might just be that they have to learn how to study, or they have to learn better note-taking skills. The soloists, they will often feel like they can't ask for help. It might mean they think that they're a failure or a fraud if they ask for help on anything to accomplish tasks. This one is important to identify, and also remind individuals that it's perfectly fine to ask for help. And a lot of times, if they're not asking for help in a timely manner, it can be detrimental to the entire team or the entire department. And sometimes, if it can be rephrased in that way, it can um, maybe make sense a little bit quicker, so it's not detrimental. And then the next one, Superman or Superwoman concept. So some imposters are pushing themselves to work harder and harder, to prove that they're not imposters. Um, the feeling that they need to succeed in all aspects of life, at work, as parents, as partners, and may feel stressed when they're not accomplishing something. So, those of you that have a hard time relaxing, if Sunday is, if you're hanging out and trying to relax and it's making you anxious that you're not relaxing, you might have a Superman or Superwoman imposter syndrome concept that's happening. That can be a good indicator. And so some of these tips to manage imposter syndrome have kind of been fluctuating in and out a little bit. But this will give us some more specific areas to think about and focus on. So from an individual standpoint, acknowledging the thoughts, putting them into perspective. So thinking about the situation and identifying, yeah, that's happening, that you're maybe feeling anxious, feeling like you don't belong. But then once that happens, reframing those thoughts to identify there's a reason for, maybe why you've been selected for a certain position or an award, um, and not allowing those thoughts to essentially take over. And that's really the main point, is not allowing negative self-talk to be detrimental to major decisions. Um, and in some cases, it can be so detrimental that the individual is just paralyzed and not able to move forward and make a choice. So in some cases, I'll just use in relation to students, that can potentially be a reason that they haven't submitted homework. Maybe they haven't shown up for class. Those types of things. It's a lot of, and you all know this, deeper things going on. Share what you're feeling with trusted friends or mentors. There's likely other individuals that might have similar feelings, or if not, they'll hopefully be able to listen, show a bit of empathy, but helping you to maybe then go back to put those thoughts into perspective. And then the last one that I personally think is really important, being in higher ed, is working on your EQ along with your IQ. And so what I mean by EQ is your emotional intelligence. Those of you that are working one-on-one with students and other individuals, not just students, but realize the importance of having a high level of emotional intelligence. In some cases, that's happened over time. You've come to realize different things and made adjustments. But I, take it as a personal responsibility with my students to focus on emotional intelligence along with their intellectual intelligence. We could add cultural intelligence in there too. But really understanding the self-awareness piece. And this is just my opinion. I haven't done research in this respect. But I do feel as though many individuals have a high level of social awareness, and a high level and ability to manage relationships. Some other models of emotional intelligence will include empathy in the social awareness piece. So they might be doing okay, but haven't truly spent time diving into the self-awareness piece. So that's why in this presentation today, I like to start with going back to my very beginning as a kid, and thinking about the concepts and what led me to where I am today, and thinking about the times when I almost let imposter syndrome and other things get in the way of my ability to succeed. So the more that we can maybe help ourselves work on self-awareness, I think the better off we are. Again, even if we feel like we already have a high level of ability to manage relationships professionally and personally, um, it I don't think it hurts to just continually do a self-awareness check, and helping our students in any way we can also do a self-awareness coming into the last stretch of the spring semester, final projects, final grades coming up. Um, to me, it's more important than ever. Um, the next piece that I wanted to share is, it comes from one of my favorite authors, Chris Bailey. I follow his podcast. It's called Becoming Better, and then he has a website, A Life of Productivity. Um, and as I was putting this information together, I happened to come across a recent article that he had posted. It's a pretty short article, but he refers to this concept of thinking in systems and how that can really help in regards to imposter syndrome. And I was fascinated by this concept because the big takeaway of it is, when we think about success, at the core of it, success is coming when we're able to work intelligently within a system of interconnected parts. So you could think about this from the standpoint of even our bodies, right? Our bodies, it's an interconnected part. And when I don't understand it, when I don't understand how it's working, or typically not working, I go to seek out professional help. Maybe it's a chiropractor, MD, whatever it might be. But when we can understand those systems, then we can understand what we need to do to succeed in those systems. The same could be said for higher education, right? Many of the students, myself included, as a first generation, I didn't really understand the system of higher education. Um, Sometimes I still don't. But basically, the system you're in helps you identify how you've worked with the intelligence that you have, and how you've interacted with the agents within that system. If it's other people, it's finishing an assignment, navigating how you choose classes, all of this. It really does go far in helping understand the success that you've achieved in overcoming an imposter syndrome. And to me, this might be the biggest takeaway, because as we look at success, we know that it's completely different. For one student to achieve a C on an exam in statistics, that might have been greater success than somebody else who actually received a B or an A. But until that student themselves understands the work that they put in to interact in the system that they're in, can they identify the work that they did to achieve that success. So I just think it's a kind of different way of thinking about it. But if we think in systems and help our students to think in that way, maybe it can help. And kind of extending on this topic, how to mentor someone with imposter syndrome. Um, the first thing, normalizing imposter feelings, letting students know that it's normal to have those feelings, letting students know that they're not any less intelligent because they're having those feelings. letting yourself know that if you're the one with imposter syndrome. Um, the next one, empirically challenge negative self-talk. So we might come across individuals or tell ourselves, well, I'm stupid. I use this one because unfortunately I heard my oldest daughter said this one day, I'm stupid. And so in that moment, stopping and immediately talking through it, right? So in that case, like, tell me exactly what you mean by that. Where did that come from? In what context are you talking about? Right. And so it was um, in regards to some math that she was working on. And I said, well, yeah, you might not understand that one right now, but look at all these other ones that you already worked through. You worked on those. This is a new concept. And so really helping individuals understand, exactly what do they mean by something when they say that. Um, the third one, um, affirm, some more. So in this concept, helping individuals remember that there's two different dimensions really of affirmations. First, in affirming every individual's inherent self-worth, right? Again, to me as faculty, yes, I want every student to succeed, but success isn't necessarily a 4.0. So at the core of it, just affirming each individual's self-worth. And then I think the second part of it is, affirming them as professionals, right? Affirming them as, again, the work that they're doing. Um, the next one in regards to deliberately counteracting stereotype threats. This is the concept of getting back to some imposters. They feel like outsiders. They feel like they don't fit in, but that's because they were made to not fit in. Coming from an indigenous background and the concept of colonialism, and not diving into that too much, but higher education can be a foreign concept even from the standpoint of culture, let alone family background. So in those cases, again, reminding if it's yourself or others, if you're the mentor, that yes, even if you feel like you don't fit in, and that might be the case, that doesn't mean that you aren't meant to be here. Number 5, share your own imposter stories, as hard as it might be, or um, embarrassing because you did so poorly on a statistics exam. Number 6, don't allow your mentee to give you all the credit. So again, in a lot of cases, mentees will try to say, well, I only, got here because of the work that you did with me, right? Our team is only as successful as you because you led us here. And that's fine. They want to share the great work that maybe you did as a supervisor or an advisor, but not allowing them to give you all the credit. And I will just say, women are especially likely to attribute success to their teammates or their supervisors more often than not. And so to kind of encompass the whole idea of imposter syndrome is, yes, it's alive, it's well, it will continue to happen. Like I said, even though I talk about it and my history on it, it still impacts me, but I don't let it take over. If I have a thought about something I want to apply for or something I want to do, I go for it. And I let others, the concept that I like to use is don't disqualify yourself. Let others disqualify you if they think that you're not fit for it. And when they determine that you are fit for it, realize that you are, and then celebrate. Like I say, celebrate big and small. This might go back to how how you grew up too. If your family was not used to celebrating accomplishments, whether they were small or big, that can be something that's hard to change. But whatever it might be, going to dinner, going out to a favorite movie or anything, but just to celebrate the work that you've done. So I just want to thank you. I'm definitely open. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask away.
I don't have a question, Amber, but I just, I want to thank you for your time. And I feel like a lot of us that are probably attending know that we all have kind of our own imposter syndrome. And I think it's something that won't go away. You kind of identified like these are some of the symptoms, what you can do to move past it, how to understand it that yourself, so that we were able to help our students in our program too. But it is kind of that cyclical cycle too of, recognizing it in yourself and the students, and some of the tangible advice that you gave us too is very helpful. I think sometimes we need this reminder, and I think, you affirmed it for us by talking through your own story as well, that everybody probably has some degree of imposter syndrome, but how to move past that and celebrate. And I do like the idea that we share the successes of our students, that we are not the ones to give credit to. And I think that's something as true professionals we feel very strongly about.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think, like I said, the idea of the work that all of you are doing, and I know you're all connected to students in so many different ways, and you see this day in and day out. But I think it's a good reminder the work that you're doing is so good. So. And thank you for the comments in the chat.
Well, if there are no questions and just apparently positive affirmations for Dr. Henderson here.
See, that's learning to take it too with imposter syndrome. It's hard to take accolades. So this is good practice. You all have a whole nother day. You have tomorrow, today.
We just jam-packed it in one day.
It's a lot. It's
a lot.
It's nice that there's this opportunity for Zoom, but Zoom fatigue is getting real, right? Especially I appreciate all the attentiveness. At the end of the day is sometimes hard, so I appreciate that.
All right, well, it looks like we'll end a little bit early here today before our next session. But again, thank you, Dr. Amber Henderson, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be able to share this information with all of our membership. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And again, thanks to all of you.